You wake. The awakening is not gentle, nor is it voluntary. It is a slow, painful crawl back to consciousness, dragged there by sheer, unyielding cold and the immediate ache in your joints. You are not in your soft, temperature-controlled bed. You are in a Viking longhouse, a skali, in the remote fishing settlement of Borg, somewhere on the coast of Norway, circa 950 AD. The first sensation is the cold, a deep, persistent chill that is woven into the very fabric of your existence. It is not the sharp, invigorating cold of a modern winter morning. It is the damp, pervasive, bone-seeping cold of a coastal climate where moisture reigns supreme. You are lying on a raised wooden sleeping bench, covered with a meager layer of flattened straw and rough, unrefined sheepskins. The straw is compressed and damp, the sheepskin stiff and smelling powerfully of lanolin and mildew. The air is thick and still. Your attempt to move is met with stiffness. You are wearing thick, heavy woolen undergarments, scratchy against your skin. This wool is vadmal, a coarse, hand-woven fabric that provides warmth but is perpetually heavy and damp. It is itchy, heavy, and smells of smoke and the slight, sour odor of old sweat. There is virtually no light. It is Dogen, the hour before dawn, and the interior of the longhouse is choked with darkness. Any feeble light that might filter through the smoke hole is blocked by the fog and the remaining hours of night. The house itself is breathing. The air quality is the second assault on your senses. The primary smell is peat smoke. The central hearth has been banked overnight, but the embers still smolder, releasing thick, acrid gray smoke that hangs low in the air, finding the smoke hole inefficiently. Your lungs sting slightly, a minor irritation that has become a constant companion. Mixed with the smoke is the smell of fish. It is the smell of survival, the rank, potent odor of tran oil used in the simple lamps, the sharp scent of dried stockfish hanging near the rafters, and the faint, cold, metallic tang of the catches processed the night before. This combination of smells is inescapable. A low, guttural cough escapes your throat. You feel the grit of the smoke in your mouth. The silence is finally broken. A heavy, shuffling sound comes from the center of the house. Einar, the eldest member of your fishing crew, is awake. He uses a rough tool to prod the ashes of the hearth, seeking the embers. The disturbance sends up a brief, choking plume of smoke, and a moment later, a small, weak tongue of flame licks the air, offering the first tentative warmth to the vast, cold space. You slowly lever yourself up. The process of getting dressed is not an act of comfort, but of practical, physical necessity. You add layers, a heavy woolen tunic, stiff leather leggings, and finally your outer vadmal cloak, possibly treated with more fish oil to aid water resistance. Every piece of clothing is cold, heavy, and resists movement. The absolute priority is fuel. The early meal, the dagmal, is swift, silent, and entirely utilitarian. The fare is almost universally grouter, a porridge of barley or oats, often cooked the night before, and now cold, thick, and congealed. It is a bland, gray mass, sometimes mixed with a meager chunk of salted meat or preserved root vegetables. You eat quickly, using a simple wooden spoon, focusing only on the caloric input. The food is often gritty, a result of the stone-grinding process that introduced minute particles of rock into the grain, slowly wearing down your teeth. Your drink is small ale, a thin, low-alcohol, fermented beverage. It is safer than the often questionable water supply and offers minimal calories, but it is also served cold, providing no internal warmth to combat the external chill. No conversation takes place. Energy must be conserved. The entire process takes less than 10 minutes. With the bare minimum of fuel ingested, the focus shifts immediately to the day's work, the sea. Your task now is baiting the long lines. These are the massive ropes made of hemp or nettle fiber, sometimes miles long, holding hundreds of iron hooks. You retrieve the coils of line from the corner of the longhouse. The rope is thick, abrasive, and freezing cold to the touch. The bait, pieces of preserved herring or mackerel cut the night before, is cold and slimy, sitting in a brine-filled bucket. You must work quickly and methodically. Check the hook to ensure it is sharp, carefully pierce and secure the cold, slippery piece of fish onto the hook, and coil the baited hook and the line back into the basket, ensuring no snags or tangles will impede the line's release later. Your fingers, already stiff from the cold and the strenuous morning prep, are now in constant contact with the raw, briny bait. The cold penetrates instantly, turning your hands into thick, numb clubs. The smell of fresh, strong fish guts and salt permeates your skin and lingers under your nails. This is the smell of your destiny. As the sky outside reluctantly brightens to a pale, metallic gray, Einar gives the signal. It is time to leave the relative warmth of the Scully. You step out the heavy wooden door. The wind hits you immediately, a sharp, cutting blast coming off the fjord, carrying the clean, biting scent of the ocean and the mist. The ground is hard-packed shingle and frozen mud. Your boat, a sexering, rests heavily on the beach, pulled up past the high tide mark. It is a workhorse, not a warrior ship, built for stability and capacity, not speed. It is waterlogged, heavy, and coated in a thin layer of frozen dew. With 3 other men, you approach the boat. There are no wheels or winches, only brute, synchronized force. You place your shoulder against the cold, rough wood of the hull. Einar calls the count. Hop! You strain with every muscle, back, legs, and shoulder. The boat groans and resists. The heavy, sharp shingle grates loudly beneath the keel. It is a sound of pure, friction-bound effort. You feel a familiar, searing strain in your lower back. The process of moving the vast dead weight requires several agonizing, full-body heaves. Finally, the boat slides forward, gaining momentum until it hits the water. As the hull floats, cold, icy seawater surges immediately over your feet. The wet leather leggings and boots offer only a momentary barrier before the cold penetrates directly to your skin. Your feet are now officially numb, and they will remain so for the next 15 hours. You climb aboard quickly. The wooden benches are wet and cold. You grasp the heavy, unpolished oar. It is thick, unyielding, and feels like a piece of the frozen earth itself. The boat is launched. The coils of baited line are secured. The sails are often left furled this close to shore. You must row through the narrow, twisting fjord waters to reach the open sea. The long, monotonous rhythm of the oar begins. Your day of unrelenting, boring, and brutal labor has fully commenced. You are heading out onto the endless gray sea. The boat is off the shingle. Your feet are already stinging, encased in damp leather and frigid seawater. The six-airing, the 6-oared longboat is heavy, designed for resilience against the North Atlantic, not speed. Your crew, Einar the Elder, young Ragnar, and the twins Helgi and Bjorn, settle into their positions. The air is still, the water an oily black under the pre-dawn gloom. But you know this calm is temporary. The first phase is the rowing. You grasp the wooden oar, thick and cold, slicked with a thin sheen of grease and salt water. The grip is immediate and unforgiving. Unlike the light, polished oars of modern racing shells, this is a tool of sheer, blunt force. Your bench is a simple cross plank, offering no ergonomic support, forcing your body into a posture of strained effort. Einar calls the cadence, a low rhythmic grunt, barely audible above the splash and the groan of the oarlocks. Pull, slide, pull, slide. The motion is repetitive to the point of trance. You must row in perfect, silent unison with your mates. Any deviation in timing wastes precious energy and disrupts the boat's momentum. Your focus narrows to the small, predictable circle of effort, the burning in your shoulders, the ache in your lower back from the constant forward hunch, the grinding of the oar's haft against your palm. You are not rowing for an hour. You are rowing for 3 hours. The fishing grounds are far from the fjord's mouth, a deliberate distance chosen to avoid the overfished coastal waters and to reach the deeper banks where the cod and haddock congregate. The cold slowly gives way to a deeper, more profound sense of heat. Not warmth, but the radiating furnace of your own metabolism, desperately burning through your scant breakfast of cold gruel. Sweat breaks out on your brow and back, only to be instantly chilled by the relentless draft blowing across the water. This combination of intense exertion and freezing environment is the Viking's cruelest test. You are simultaneously exhausted and freezing, wet inside and out. The repetitive sensory input is designed to lull you. The constant schlick-thwack of the oar hitting the water, the squeak of the ropes, the groan of the hull, the sight of the bow of the boat perpetually rising and falling against the same gray horizon, the steady, worsening ache in your trapezius muscles. By the time Einar finally shouts the command to ship the oars, your arms feel like lead weights and your chest heaves for air. You have burned through the day's energy reserves and the actual work has yet to begin. The boat slows, bobbing heavily on the swells. The chosen location is marked only by a few faint, almost imperceptible landmarks on the distant shore. A notch in a cliff face, a stand of stunted pine. Einar relies on memory, intuition, and the complex, subtle language of the sea bottom. Now begins the task of setting the long lines. The lines which you so meticulously baited in the dark must be deployed. They are not cast casually. They are laid precisely along the seabed using small stone weights attached every few fathoms. The lines are vast, containing hundreds of hooks. Your job is the unfurling and dropping. You stand precariously near the bow, managing the heavy basket of coiled, baited line. The line is thick, rough on your already raw palms. You must work quickly, keeping pace with the boat's slow, deliberate movement, feeding the line overboard without snagging, tangling, or allowing the weights to pull the boat off course. The rhythm now changes. No longer is it the grunt of rowing, but the quiet, intense whish of the line unwinding, the plop of the stone weights hitting the water, and the quiet, constant chatter of the baited hooks splashing overboard. Your hands are the connection to the freezing water. You are constantly brushing against the wet line, the raw, cold fish pieces, and the freezing water. The constant contact with the cold drains the heat from your extremities almost instantly. Your fingers become clumsy, swollen, and numb, thick clubs of flesh barely capable of gripping. This process takes another 2 hours. You are bent over the gunwale, constantly exposed to the sea spray. The salt spray crystallizes on your face and cloak, making your skin tight and uncomfortable. Once the lines are set, there is a period of waiting. This is not rest. The boat drifts slowly, patiently. The crew checks the drift, ensuring the line settles correctly. The silence is broken only by the slapping of the waves against the hull and the whistling of the wind, sounds that are more isolating than any silence. No one speaks much. Conversation is an unnecessary expenditure of calories. You chew a piece of dried meat or hard bread, tough and demanding on the jaw, washing it down with another swallow of cold, weak ale. This period of waiting is psychologically demanding. You are entirely at the mercy of the sea and the fish. Then the command, "Hala!" The sheer terror of the work begins again. The long line must be pulled back in, by hand, hook by hook, fish by fish. You and your partner stand side by side, taking turns at the line. Your hands, already frozen and aching, must now grip the wet, taut, and endlessly long rope. This is a task that requires brute, sustained effort. The hauling sequence is immediate. You grab the line with thick, freezing fingers. You pull, using the weight of your body and the power of your back and legs, hauling the line in, hand over hand, in short, forceful bursts. The line must be carefully coiled again in the basket, and when a fish comes up, the resistance increases dramatically. A large cod, a prize, can weigh 20 pounds or more. You must maintain your grip on the line with one hand, while the other quickly unhooks the flapping, slick, cold fish. The fish thrashes, covered in blood and slime, which immediately freezes onto your gloves and sleeves. This hauling process is unrelenting. For the next 6 to 8 hours, you are engaged in a constant tug-of-war with the sea. The rough hemp line rips and chafes the skin on your hands, even through the stiff leather gloves, scraping against the raw cuts and salt burns already on your palms. The constant bending, lifting, and pulling motion, always slightly unbalanced in the rocking boat, puts immense strain on your lower back. The pain moves past the point of simple discomfort and settles into a dull, agonizing throb. You are constantly drenched. by waves, by fish slime, by the line itself. The vadmal clothing, heavy as it is, quickly saturates, clinging to your skin and drawing the heat out of your body. The work is performed in a daze. Your mind cycles between focusing on the immediate task, grip, pull, coil, fish, and a desperate hope for the end of the line. The thought process becomes extremely simple. Endure. By the time the last of the line is hauled, your entire body is trembling, not just from the cold, but from sheer muscular exhaustion. The bottom of the boat, the bilge, is now full of the day's catch, a shining, bloody, icy testament to your physical endurance. The sun is beginning its slow, predictable descent. You have secured the harvest, but the journey home and the most tedious labor of all, the processing, still await. Einar commands the crew to take up the oars once more. The long, agonizing row back to Borg begins against the setting sun and the rising tide, powered by empty stomachs and sheer brutal habit. The row back to Borg, with the boat heavy and low in the water, is a blur of profound systemic exhaustion. The cold, wet air seems to offer no oxygen to your burning lungs. As the sun dips toward the horizon, painting the fjord walls in cold shades of orange and bruised purple, the crew moves on autopilot. There is no joy in the successful catch, only the looming dread of the work yet to come. When the boat finally scrapes the shingle, the effort required to beach the vessel feels almost superhuman. Pushing the waterlogged wood and the massive weight of the fish up past the tide line is a final, violent expenditure of energy. The blood pounds in your ears and your vision tunnels slightly. Your back is seized, a rigid column of pain. But there is no respite. The catch is perishable, and the process of preservation, the true purpose of this entire existence, must begin immediately. You shuffle toward the Fiskebua, or, if the catch is enormous, simply a designated area near the colossal wooden drying racks. The space is dedicated entirely to this chore, and it smells of old salt, fresh blood, and the metallic tang of frozen fish scales. The light is poor. A few smoking tran lamps, stone dishes filled with rancid, rendered cod liver oil with a moss or linen wick, cast a dim, flickering, yellowish glow. The shadows dance and the work area seems to heave with activity and gloom. Your hands, already scraped raw by the hemp lines, are now plunged into the world of slime, ice, and gore. You are issued a short, heavy knife, your primary tool. The work is performed in a precise, silent assembly line, repeated hundreds of times without pause. The head of the large cod or haddock is severed with one brutal, decisive chop against a thick wooden block. The head is not waste. It is saved for stock or, most importantly, for the valuable oil within the liver. Next, you must slit the fish open from vent to throat with quick, practiced ease. Then the whole mass of cold, blue-gray entrails is scooped out and dropped into a slop bucket. The liver is immediately retrieved and placed into a separate, clean bucket. It is too valuable to mix with the other organs. Finally, using a specialized technique, the fish is flattened by cutting along one side of the backbone, leaving only enough muscle attached to hold the two sides together. This splitting allows the fish to be hung evenly. You stand hunched over the low wooden bench. Your body is rigid. The blood and viscera constantly coat your leather apron and your lower sleeves, mixing with the seawater and salt into a stiff, freezing crust that weighs down your garments. The cold is an enemy here. The knives, the fish, the very air, everything is near freezing. The raw fish slime acts as a conduit for the cold, drawing the remaining heat from your hands. Your fingers quickly become so numb that gripping the knife handle is a conscious, painful act of will. The danger of a deep, accidental cut is constant as fatigue sets in. You see small red drops of your own blood mix seamlessly with the fish blood on the bench. The only acceptable pace is speed. Every minute the fish remains unprocessed, the risk of spoilage increases. You are driven by the silent, judging presence of Einar and the foreman, and the knowledge that your effort directly translates to your share of the winter stores. The immediate goal is to transform the soft, perishable flesh into stockfish, the durable, valuable export. The split fish, still dripping blood and brine, must be immediately carried outside to the Hjell. These massive structures are pyramids or long walls of interconnected wooden poles designed to hold thousands of fish high above the ground, exposed to the drying effects of the wind and cold. You are tasked with carrying heavy bundles of fish, which are tied together by the tail in pairs. You climb the unstable, icy rungs of the yell, exposed once again to the biting wind. The movement is awkward and dangerous. You must stretch to hang the fish securely, using the specific complex knot that prevents the fish from slipping, even months from now, when they are rock hard. This work continues until the last suitable fish is swaying in the twilight. The process of drying will take 2 to 3 months. The wind, the essential preservation agent, is relentless, buffeting the structure. Any secondary catch, smaller fish, or fish destined for domestic consumption or shorter trade routes is salted. You spend time mixing heavy, coarse sea salt with layers of fish in large wooden barrels or troughs. The salt is a brutal reminder of your raw state. It penetrates every cut and crack on your hands, creating a searing, chemical pain that is simply part of the experience. You tamp down the fish with heavy stones to ensure the salt brine penetrates the flesh. The final and perhaps most foul-smelling task is dealing with the livers. The cod livers are a treasure trove of oil, tran, essential for lighting, waterproofing, and high-value trade. They are placed in large covered wooden vats. There is no complex boiling process here. The oil is rendered slowly over time by the gradual decomposition of the liver cells, often aided by gentle heat from the sun or a slow-burning fire. You are responsible for tending this vat, periodically checking, stirring, and skimming off the rancid, potent oil that rises to the surface. The stench is overpowering, a thick, suffocating smell of decay and concentrated fish essence. It saturates your clothes and hair, becoming the smell of Borg itself. The processing finally winds down around 9 or 10 o'clock, long after true darkness has fallen. The fiskbua is left to the cold and the residual stink. You are utterly exhausted, your whole body vibrating with fatigue. Your work is not quite done. You must clean the tools. The knives must be painstakingly scoured clean of corrosive salt and blood, dried and then honed on a whetstone, ready for the pre-dawn baiting. Then the final meal, the natmal. It is taken quickly, silently, and without ceremony, often standing near the dying embers of the hearth. It is the same cold gruel, perhaps a chunk of salted, boiled fish, and more cold ale. It provides only a fleeting, meager sense of warmth. You strip off only your outer, blood-caked garments. To change completely is too cold and too time-consuming. You collapse onto your sleeping bench. The longhouse is now pitch black, save for the faint glow of the banked fire. The final sensation is the rhythmic, deep ache in your forearms and the stinging rawness of your hands. Your day has been 20 hours long, defined by ceaseless physical discomfort and monotonous labor. Your sleep is a necessity, a blackout, not a comfort. You close your eyes knowing that the cycle, the cold, the smoke, the ore, the knife, the salt, and the blood will begin again in 4 short hours. The faint, rhythmic click of stone against stone breaks the heavy silence of the longhouse, preceding Einar's rough cough by mere minutes. It is the sound of the quernstone being turned, usually by one of the older women, already at work in the deep gloom. The sound is an auditory symbol of the endless, grinding need for fuel, both for the body and for the hearth. Even as the fishermen recover from their blackout sleep, the rest of the community is already engaged in their parallel, equally relentless cycle of supporting the fishing economy. For the women, the day is defined by maintenance and processing that complements the men's catch. If the men are the harvesters, the women are the persistent engineers of survival. Their labor is physically less violent, but mentally more enduring, a slow, continuous wearing down of body and spirit within the smoky confinement of the scully. Their hands, though spared the immediate salt burns of the long line, are equally abused, cracked from constant exposure to cold water, stained permanently by dyes, grease, and smoke, and calloused from the rough handles of wooden tools. The primary task of the early morning is textile and net repair. The fishing lines and nets are constantly damaged, snagged on rocks, frayed by movement, or attacked by hungry seals. These nets, woven from precious hemp, flax, or even stinging nettle fiber, represent immense wealth and labor. To mend a net is not a simple patch. It is hours of patient, repetitive, frustrating work. A fishing net is laid across the damp floor or stretched between two posts. You must sit hunched over, using a bone or wooden needle, shuttle, painstakingly reknotting the broken lines. The fiber is rough, chafing the sensitive skin between the fingers. The work demands absolute focus, yet is so dull that the mind aches for distraction. You repeat the same knot, the same flick of the wrist, the same precise tension for 3, 4, or 5 hours, often by the flickering, greasy light of a tran lamp, inhaling the smoke and the stale air. The fate of the next day's catch rests on the integrity of this mended net. The process of wool spinning and weaving runs constantly in the background. The wool sheared from the small, hardy sheep kept nearby must be cleaned of burrs and dirt, carded, spun into thread using a hand spindle, verfil, and finally woven on a loom. This process never stops because clothing, blankets, and sailcloth are perpetually wearing out. The rhythm of the spindle, the low thrumming sound as the thread is drawn out, is another drone in the longhouse's soundtrack of monotony. It is slow, precise, and vital. There is no such thing as extra cloth. Every thread must be utilized, every scrap patched and reused until it disintegrates into fiber dust. Then there is the essential chore of water and fire management. Fuel is scarce. Peat is heavy, wet, and must be dried before it can burn efficiently, yet it yields smoke that constantly irritates the lungs. Firewood is even scarcer in this rocky coastal region and must be guarded jealously. Every journey to fetch water from the distant, often partially frozen stream is a heavy, precarious trip, often carried in large wooden buckets. The water is cold and the journey is treacherous, particularly during the months when the ground is slick with ice or mud. This continuous low-level physical effort is unseen but essential. The greatest difficulty in the domestic environment, however, is the lack of space and hygiene. The longhouse, the scully, is a single, vast, smoky room housing up to 20 people, along with dogs, pigs sometimes, and inevitably pests. Privacy is a forgotten luxury. You are always within earshot, eyeshot, and noseshot of everyone else. The constant presence of others, their sounds, their smells, their minor illnesses is inescapable. The floor is dirt, packed hard, often covered with old soiled straw, streccia. While fresh rushes or straw are occasionally scattered, the existing bedding and floor covering accumulate filth, food scraps, and detritus from the processing area. This environment is a perpetual breeding ground for lice, fleas, and chronic skin conditions. The smoke, while irritating, serves a dual purpose. It drives away some flying insects and acts as a minor preservative for the structure itself, but it does not eliminate the constant infestation. The itchy misery of lice, ULUs, is another daily constant, dealt with crudely by combing or simply learned to be endured. Food preparation, too, is tediously repetitive. Besides the daily grauter and cold fish, the domestic side is responsible for preserving non-fish food, fermenting milk into curds or sour cream, baking flatbreads, flat broad, on hot stones or iron griddles, simple, unleavened, and tough, and the slow, careful process of curing and smoking any hunted meat. There is no culinary variety, only the same salt and smoke profile dominating every meal, day after day, year after year. Every task is an iteration of the last, designed not for pleasure or efficiency, but for absolute stubborn survival. Even the tools require constant attention. The iron implements, the knives, the hooks, the few axes, are priceless and must be fiercely protected from the corrosive damp and salt. Oiling and honing these tools is a nightly ritual. You must sit by the dying fire, meticulously applying tran oil or animal fat to the metal, then using a whetstone to sharpen the edge. The sound of the stone scraping against the metal is another monotonous, low sound of survival. Shh, repeated until the blade holds a perfect, lethal edge for the next day's gutting. The entire domestic ecosystem is a finely balanced machine of continuous, overlapping, and equally exhausting tasks. The work is physically demanding, mentally vacant, and socially constricting. There is no division between work and life. There is only the work. As the men rise from their exhausted sleep and begin the baiting, the domestic workers have already been awake for hours, ensuring the fire is hot, the food is ready, and the nets are whole. They are the silent, constant anchor holding the whole, cold, smoky world of Borg in place. The low, unending sounds of domestic labor, the scrape of the quern, the gentle thrum of the hand spindle, the quiet, focused snapping of fiber during net repair, form the constant background drone of Borg. These sounds are not those of industry or progress. They are the sounds of necessity, a perpetual sonic reminder that the body must never be still and the materials must never be wasted. The transition from the brutal physical labor of the sea to the cramped, smoky tedium of the longhouse is merely a change of prison, not a release. The relentless demands of survival have forged a peculiar, hard-edged cultural stoicism that defines the mental landscape of the Viking fishing community. And it is this mental state, more than the physical cold, that you would find utterly unbearable. The modern mind is conditioned by the concept of ambition, of forward movement, progress, and improvement. In Borg, ambition is reductive. It is simply the drive to ensure the yell is full by the autumn equinox, nothing more. Any thought beyond the immediate task, mending this knot, sharpening this blade, pulling this oar, is a dangerous luxury. The grand narratives of the raiding Vikings, of silver halls, foreign lands, and martial glory, are known, yet they are as distant and abstract as the stars. Your destiny is local, defined by the narrow opening of the fjord and the depth of the fishing bank. The only honor you seek is the quiet respect of Einar, earned through silent, perfect execution of your designated task. This acceptance of absolute, unchanging place in the world would crush the modern, aspirational psyche. Leisure, as a concept, does not exist. The brief moments between tasks are not dedicated to relaxation, but to essential, low-energy maintenance. If you are not working, you are resting solely to work again. Entertainment is severely limited and often utilitarian. The sagas recounted by the oldest member of the house are not spontaneous acts of storytelling. They are cultural rote, repeated narratives that reinforce the community's shared values of endurance and fate. Weird. The jokes are old, the songs are simple working shanties, and the silence is preferred. There are no musical instruments of complexity, no books, and no way to consume news or novelty from the outside world other than the occasional brief visit of a trade ship, which brings more goods than gossip. The resulting lack of mental stimulation creates a vast, yawning void, a cognitive hunger that the modern mind, addicted to information and novelty, would find agonizing. You would find yourself desperate for change, for a new image, a different sound, a fresh perspective, and the unchanging walls of the longhouse and the gray expanse of the sea would offer nothing but repetition. The internal dialogue of a Viking fisherman is simple, dominated by pain and necessity. There is no time for existential questioning or complex moral debate. Morality is defined by practical utility. A good action is one that increases the community's chance of surviving the next winter. A bad action is one that wastes resources or endangers the boat. The constant exposure to pain, the salt in the cuts, the ache in the back, the cold in the lungs, is not an obstacle to be overcome, but a baseline condition to be ignored. The Viking mind is taught from childhood that pain is the cost of living, and true failure is not feeling pain, but letting that pain stop you from rowing. This psychological programming for absolute endurance is the final, unassailable barrier that separates you from lasting a day in Borg. You are a creature of comfort, defined by choice and aspiration. The man in Borg is a creature of necessity, defined by fate and repetition. The entire rhythm of his life, the Dugan awakening, the cold Dagmal, the rhythmic pull of the oar, the bloody slow processing, the brief smoky Natmal, is a loop of perfect, grinding efficiency. There is no variance, no surprise, and certainly no comfort. The only change that matters is the wind direction and the temperature of the water. You are not failing because you are weak. You are failing because you are mentally unequipped for absolute, unchanging emptiness. Your mind needs hope, complexity, and the promise of a better tomorrow. The Viking of Borg only needs the promise of another tomorrow, identical to the last, bought with the unending currency of his own physical suffering. The 4 hours of exhausted sleep are now over. Einar's rough cough cuts through the smoky air. The quernstone begins its soft, monotonous scrape. The long, agonizing, yet ultimately boring work of the new day has begun. You roll off the damp pallor, stiff and cold, reaching for your coarse woolen tunic, resigned to the simple, brutal truth of your inevitable failure to escape the loop. The cold metal of the ore awaits,